Alright, here's the back page of 3a. So, what we're trying to do here is solve this equation, and specifically, we're going to solve it using the inverse. So here, once you get a cosine, to move that over to the other side, we're going to get x equals cosine inverse of -1. So in other words, what angle has a cosine value of -1? Well, let's find out. So cosine is the x value. -1 would be back here. What angle is that? 180 degrees. Okay. Part B. Again, we need to isolate the x value. So first we're going to get sine of x by itself. So add the square root of 3 to both sides, and then divide by 2. And you'll get sine of x equals the square root of 3 over 2. Now, we use the inverse, so x equals sine inverse of the square root of 3 over 2. In other words, what angle has a sine value of the square root of 3 over 2? Sine is the y value, square root of 3 over 2 is the tall one, so it's going to be this tall angle right here, 60 degrees. Okay, on C. Again, get the tangent by itself. The first thing we're going to do is add this 3, which is going to make this side 0. Then we're going to divide by -3, still going to be 0. So we get tangent of x equals 0. And then do the inverse. So what angle has a tangent value of 0? Again, if you think about the tangent as the slope, y over x, that means you need a y value of 0, a rise of 0, and then a run of whatever. So in other words, the sine value would have to be 0. So it's going to be this angle right here, 0. So again, for tangent, think about the rise over the run, y over x. So if it's 0, that means we've got a 0 on top, a rise of 0. So it's horizontal. And remember, tangents between -90 and 90. Sine is between -90 and 90. Forgot to mention that earlier. And cosine inverse between 0 and 180. Okay, so here, same thing. We're going to start off by doing sine inverse to cancel out the sine. So we get 2x equals sine inverse of -1/2. Okay, so what angle has a sine of -1/2? So that's a small y value, that would be -30 degrees. So 2x equals -30. And then, to get x by itself, divide by 2. So x equals -15 degrees. On E, we're going to subtract by 3 first. That gives us a -2, and then divide by 4. So cosine of 2x, so that would be -2 over 4, which will reduce to -1/2. Next, I'm going to do cosine inverse. So 2x is cosine inverse of -1/2. So what angle has a cosine of -1/2? Well, cosine is the x value, -1/2 would be right there, so it's a small x value. That's going to be that 60 degree angle, which is 120 degrees. So 2x equals 120 degrees. Divide by 2, x is 60 degrees. And then on F. So first we're going to divide by 4. So we get sine, and you know how to write this now, sine squared of x. Here's another way to write it. Sine squared of x equals 3 divided by 4, 3/4. So now, to get sine of x by itself, we need to take the square root of both sides. So sine of x equals the square root of 3 over, remember when you take a square root of a fraction, do the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom. So the square root of 3 over the square root of 4, which is the square root of 3 over 2. Now, one little thing I want to point out here, when we solve this, we could get a positive value when we take the square root. We could also get a negative value. So sometimes we do a plus or minus. Here, the way we've been working these problems, we're working these to only get a single answer, so we'll just take the positive one here. But if you put a negative square root of 3 over 2, that would still be fine. So what angle has a sine value of the square root of 3 over 2? That's 60 degrees. Now, G. So it asks about equation A, that's up here. So how many possible angle solutions are there that solve this equation? How many possible angles could we find that have a cosine of -1? Well, there's an infinite number of them. Okay, now, we don't get an infinite number of answers. We only get a single answer when we use the inverse. Why? So what I would say here is something about its range. So we've restricted its range. So we restricted the range, this is cosine, so we restricted the range of cosine by choice from 0 to 180 degrees. So that's why we only get one answer, because we designed cosine inverse in such a way that we only got one answer to make our solutions easier to work with. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll post another video for section 3B.